This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Many people needing help with their debt problems find my company, Hoyes Michalos, through our Hoyes.com website. They send us a message describing their debt problems. I've never done this before, but today I want to read you the first message that we received from a person with a debt problem. Here is that message, and I quote, "Due to a recent gambling incident, my debt load has increased significantly. I do not believe that I can afford to reasonably pay my current debt load. I think a consumer proposal might be the right thing for me." End quote. What was his recent gambling incident? How much debt did he incur by gambling? He seems like a smart guy. He's done his research. He thinks a consumer proposal may be the best solution for him. So why does a smart guy gamble? What causes someone to gamble to the point where they're borrowing to do it, and now they have a debt load that, as he said, he can't afford to repay? Lots of questions, and today I have that guy here as a guest on the podcast. So let's get started. Who are you?
I'm Beau Humphreys, and I had a gambling incident, I guess.
Well, and so that email you sent us, it was 8 or 9 years ago now. So why don't we go through the chronology and talk about it? So do you remember what was going through your brain at the time that you sent that email to us so many years ago?
I do remember, and it's funny that I said a gambling incident. I think I was probably trying to be as politically correct as possible, because the incident was my whole life up to that point.
So it was not one event, it was a series of events.
I could have been referring to an event years earlier, but at that point, I think I was at the point where I couldn't even afford to gamble anymore. I had resigned to, I ruined my life, and I can't even do what I tried to do in the past and gamble more to get the money back that I lost.
Well, so walk us through it then. What kind of gambling are we talking about?
So, well, I mean, it started really early, but when I was 11. But I'll talk about that
when
in a
you
sec.
were 11.
When I was
okay.
11.
Okay.
But really, it was the online gambling that got me. You don't have to leave your house, and for me, gambling was a very private thing. It's not something that I would boast about. It was not something I would do with friends. It was my coping mechanism.
So it wasn't a social thing for you. A lot of people, older people in particular, we see this a lot in our practice that, perhaps they've lost a spouse, kind of bored, so they can get on the buses, go on the junkets to Brantford or Niagara Falls or the slots or something like that, and it becomes a social thing, and then it becomes a gambling thing after that. For you, that wasn't the case.
No, and for them, that may or may not be an addiction. If they have the disposable income to do that on a weekly basis and they don't have anything else going on, I'm not going to judge anybody for doing that. It's, an addiction becomes when you start to use money that was for something else, say your rent, or, I've talked to people in the past who gambled away their mortgage and then a second mortgage. And that's really unfortunate. And that's when it comes down to an addiction. And also when you start doing things and everything is revolving around the gambling, it's more important than your family and other things in your life. So.
And I guess that's a good definition of an addiction. It becomes so important that everything revolves around it. So you said starting at age 11.
Yeah, so there was an inciting incident that I go back to, and it was I had saved up a lot of money to buy a Super Nintendo. Now, in 1991, they had come out in the U.S., but not in Canada. So I had to to get it by mail order. And I'm 11, or even like just about to be 11 at that time, because it was 1991 and I'm born in September. And I saved up all my birthday and Christmas money, and I asked my parents, because I needed their help to get a mail order. I couldn't just go and buy it myself. And they saw the price, which was about, over $300, perhaps even US dollars, and I forget what the exchange rate was at that time. And they said, that's a lot of money. Let's talk about it. Maybe some other time, but let's not do that. And I had this reaction, this spoiled kid reaction of I not getting what I want, and I decided to go ahead and spend that Super Nintendo money in secret. buying lottery tickets. Now you might ask,
wow, how is this possible that an 11-year-old kid can buy lottery tickets?
That's right. That's the question to ask. And in 91, I think the OLG laws were in place, but very few retailers were enforcing them. And the loophole was usually, oh, I need a couple of tickets for my mom.
Yeah.
And then, oh, my mom wants me to cash in these tickets too. So the retailers weren't too concerned. They're making a sale. They're getting business. There were not a lot of penalties. And I think probably even a couple of years after, they started to enforce it a lot more. And then, I think retailers are a little more careful now.
So you were there at the right place at the right time.
Or the wrong place.
Or the wrong place at the wrong time.
Exactly. So it was just a fun sort of week at the mall with my friends, and it was really, exhilarating. That's you're spending money. Oh, maybe we won $50 on a $2 scratch ticket. So what it did was it kind of opened my mind to this idea that I can make money out of what I thought was nothing, but what I didn't realize is, it's fleeting. And I spent all that money that week. And my parents later on asked for where the money was, because, maybe we can go buy it now that it's in Canada. And I had to admit that I had spent it all. And that was kind of the first time that I, spent all of my money gambling. And it just kind of built from there. I didn't have a lot of money through high school. And, I did lottery tickets here and there, but it's when you don't have money, you can't spend money. And when you have credit, you can't use your credit card. But I turned 18. I went to university. I had an emergency credit card from my parents. And that's when it just fell apart. It got huge, if you wish. In residence, I was just gambling. First year at Western, when I was there, I would gamble at night. Sometimes I wouldn't go to classes. I would gamble then. And
what kind of gambling are we talking?
So this is online gambling. I would play probably like card games, blackjack or poker or what have you. And I would, there'd be a $2,500 check coming to me in the mail, and then I would get it by courier, and everybody would be like, wow, this is like real. But what they didn't know is I had already spent that $2,500 again, and probably a couple of times over. And the only thing that kind of pushed me out of that first lapse, if you will, was the fact that I was using my parents' emergency credit card to try to get a lot of the money back. And so there was the accountability. If I could have done it all in private, I don't know if anybody would have really known. I would have just started struggling with the debt then. But my parents found out, and I got counseling, and they took the credit card back, and then so at least somebody was aware at that time. But over the next 8 years, I had many relapses. Give my credit cards to my family for a little bit, then I'd be better, and it just came down to, how is this ever going to go away? How do we make this go away? I spent a lot of time at CAMH. We went through behavioral therapy, and I saw a counselor, great counselor for years. And I just, I ended up gambling so much. And whenever something stressful would happen, it was my coping mechanism. I would go there. And so coming down to that email, this is, 2008, and I'm just kind of at my wit's end. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to be able to afford these credit card payments that I have if I just keep going. Like, I tried living in cheaper places, and it just, all that did was affect my quality of life. And so I moved into a place, and then I just started looking for alternate solutions to my problem, as opposed to cutting down my spending or trying to stop gambling, or because even if I always thought, even if I did, somehow somebody magically paid everything off, would I stop gambling? It doesn't work that way. I was actually afraid at the time that if I did have any available money, that I would use it.
So you were looking to treat the symptom as opposed to the problem, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and I mean, at that point, I started being a little more introspective with looking at the consumer proposal, considering bankruptcy for the first time. I never even thought of it as a thing that I could do. And when I started looking into it, it started to make more sense, because I knew that I would not have access to credit. And that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah, and I want to talk about those two things, but let's look at both sides of it then. So there's the gambling issue, which led to the debt issue. So how did you deal with the gambling issue? And then we'll talk about the debt issue.
So, well, it's funny because I would say that one of the first steps of dealing with the gambling issue was dealing with that debt issue, because what it did is it gave me, it's all temporary methods, temporary protection, right? You get like, stopping your credit cards or giving them to somebody to hold, or having someone look at your bank account so that if they see any gambling transactions, they can stop you. It's only temporary. But this one was more of a permanent temporary, in that I couldn't get credit for a long time. And credit was the only way I knew how to gamble. I was never into casinos, and I hadn't bought scratch tickets since I was a teenager. And the benefits of those were like, it takes forever to get some money. And it's just, there's no, quick wins.
It's not the quick endorphin hit.
That's right. Not even close. Even though I did dabble in scratch tickets along the way, and pretty much everything else you can think of. So when I decided to do the proposal, it just made so much sense, and I would say it kind of saved me.
So it was actually the proposal that helped you deal with the gambling.
Because I was able to now say, okay, the money thing, that's taken care of. Now I can focus on what is actually, like, I don't feel as much at risk to myself. That's what it is. And for people who don't know about addiction, there's two sides. There's actually two people. I even remember having conversations with myself, like saying, like, stop this. Like, why are you doing this? And during the day, I was successful. And then after hours, I was gambling, and people had no idea. Most of the people in my life, except for my parents and my brother and a couple other close people, did not know. And it's a hard thing to deal with, because you just want it to get out there. So, I was able to say, okay, well, now you other part of me, you're kind of screwed for a little bit. Now I can think and figure out what is actually wrong with me. And I turned to like way more introspection. And I did mindfulness course with CAMH, which is great.
And can you just explain what CAMH is?
Sorry, CAMH is the Canadian Association of Mental Health, and they have a problem gambling service, and it's really great because they have people who are trained in addiction and specifically gambling, because they have smoking, they have alcohol and drugs as well, but it's not the same. You need to understand what a gambler is going through, and so but my time there, I explored all these things, and I was like, none of this stuff is helping. What is actually, there must be something else. And so I stumbled across a test online that was a test for attention deficit disorder. And I was trying everything at that point. So I took the test, and I was like, this is me. Like, can't read a book, can't make friends, terrified of everything. Everybody manifested in different ways, but this was are you afraid to start or finish things? Are you afraid to do anything because you don't know if you'll be able to handle it, the amount of energy that it's going to take from you, the focus that a simple interaction or a simple work task requires. Everything was hard for me, and this is me. So I was lucky enough to have access to a psychiatrist at CAMH. Which everything there is free for addicts, which is a fantastic thing. And she gave me the real test, and I have attention deficit disorder, and I was medicated, and everything changed.
So the ADD is what led to the gambling.
It is, and so when I talk to people about gambling and addictions and what they are, I usually say that the addiction is not the problem. It's the response to the problem. It's the coping mechanism for what is actually affecting your life. And for a lot of people, it is, like the more obvious ones like depression or anxiety. But for some people, it's mental health issues like attention deficit or something that's been undiagnosed. And simple medication is often what you need.
So you were able to deal with the ADD, and I guess it's not something you cure, it's something you deal with.
It isn't something you cure, unfortunately.
So, but you've got that under control, I assume. And so let's talk about the second piece of it, which was the debt piece of it then. And I realize they're all kind of interrelated here. It's not like, one is separate from the other. But so you reached out to us and you ended up filing a consumer proposal.
I did.
And what was the thought process? Because in your email that I read at the start, you had obviously done some research already. It's not uncommon, the email you sent us, in that you said, I think the solution is this. And obviously when we meet with someone, we go, well, okay, let's figure it out. And in your case, yeah, you were right. That was the solution. And I can touch on, I think, why that was probably the solution you picked. But why do you think that was the solution as opposed to something like bankruptcy?
Because, I mean, for a lot of people, bankruptcy carries this stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it did at the time. I realize now sometimes it's a better option. And I think for me, I was able to hold on to, kind of my assets or the ability to earn more. I kind of had this feeling that if I went full bankruptcy, that I wouldn't be able to recover or grow out of this, or I might feel like I was just under the weight of it. And with the proposal, all of the different options with the proposal, and that if you start making more money, then that's fine. You don't have to pay more money. And the proposal in itself is just the deal with your creditors, and it's final, and you make your payments. I really liked that. I really liked that I had options, because I felt like I was heading towards the light, so to speak. And I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I knew this was a first step, and I wanted it to be open for me, and I didn't want to feel trapped. And I guess even though this may not be true, bankruptcy felt like it was more trapping to me.
It's almost as though you're an optimist and you viewed that as a more optimistic solution.
Yes, I am an optimist. My wife will tell you that. And I did view it as the ability for me to grow and to make decisions. And I knew that I was being introspective much more, and that maybe eventually that I would find this. And so,
yeah, and just so that people listening understand kind of the mechanics of what you're talking about, in a bankruptcy, the government sets a limit. You're allowed to earn this much, and it's based on a number of factors: the size of your family, if you have medical expenses, that sort of thing. If you earn more than that level, you're paying a penalty of half of the amount you're over. So if you're a single guy, and we're recording this in 2017, the number changes, and certainly would have been different back when you did it, but the limit's around $2,100 a month. So if you're making $3,100 a month, you're $1,000 over the limit, you've got to pay a penalty, surplus income penalty of $500 a month. So in a bankruptcy, you don't know how much you're going to have to pay unless you know exactly what your income is going to be during the period of the bankruptcy. With a consumer proposal, as was done in your case, we go to the creditors and we say, here's what my life looks like right now. Here's what I'm making. This is what I can afford to pay. It's more than you get in a bankruptcy, probably. Take the deal. And in your case, obviously they did. So it was kind of a win-win. You knew exactly what you had to pay, and they agreed to the deal, obviously. And so the proposal was completed. You were able to make your payments, I assume.
Yeah, I had a 50 months. I think it was 50 months at $300 a month. So it was my debt was reduced, and I know that it's not the same for everybody, but mine was reduced from $40,000 to $15,000, which was huge to me at the time. Yeah,
and those are relatively typical numbers, I would say. I mean, the typical client we deal with has around $55,000 worth of unsecured debt. So we're ignoring, obviously, mortgages and car loans in that number. Mm-hmm. And the typical proposal is probably somewhere around a third of that number, which is roughly the numbers that you're talking about. So that's a fairly typical. And in your case, there was quite a weight lifted off your shoulders as a result of that.
Because it was all credit card debt. This wasn't a subprime line of credit or a mortgage for that matter.
So higher interest rate debt.
They were up in the 20s, or at least close to that. And I became a balance transfer master at that time.
Yeah.
Everything would come in the mail. I used them all, everything that I could, until I couldn't transfer the balances anymore. And then now I'm faced with this huge interest and minimum payments that were just eroding my life. And I think that led me definitely down the consumer proposal path.
And so how has your life been different since? So the proposal has been paid off now for a number of years.
Yeah, I paid it off, and then you have to wait 3 years after that.
There's a note on your credit report that stays for 3 years that says you filed a consumer proposal after the payments are made. I mean, you can still borrow money, but you're faced with potentially higher interest rates, things like that. So the proposal was paid off, and then have you taken steps to rebuild your credit? Do you not have any credit? How has that changed your mindset?
During the proposal, I got a secured credit card. People's Trust was pretty good for that. I tried to get one from TD, but they wouldn't even have it. Unfortunately, yeah, and it's unfortunate that I think that was even after the proposal was paid off, and they have very specific guidelines, and banks have every right to do that. But I gave them the money, and they still wouldn't give me credit for that amount. And unfortunately, I'm not going to bank at TD for that reason.
Yep. Well, banks are funny because I could show you somebody else who applied the day after you, and they got it. There's no rhyme or reason at the time.
That's really upsetting to me because I went through the whole process of, it was a $600 credit card. I wanted it to be something that I had a branch that I could go to, say, and they went through the whole process and then denied me without even knowing what their policy was before they let me apply.
The computer kicked it out. If you'd asked for $1 million mortgage, you probably would have got that.
I might have got that at a high rate. I'm sure.
Exactly.
But I was able to keep my credit rating, up to date throughout that, at least some reporting. That I have a credit card and I'm paying it off, even though it was secured by a $500 GIC in Vancouver, People's Trust. But after that, once it was paid off, and then when the 3 years expired, everything gets wiped clean. You got to do a little bit of work with the Equifax and TransUnion people to make sure everything is clean.
Yeah,
but
we could do a whole show on that. Yes, they live in their own world sometimes too. But
with the due diligence, you can write to them and say, hey, you took this proposal off, so you have to take everything else that goes along with it, and they have to abide by that. It might take a little bit of time, and then my credit rating just went through the roof, and I started getting offers again. And now you might say, well, you didn't go get credit cards again. Well, I did, because having a credit card is good for your credit rating, and for your credit report. I just don't leave a balance ever. I probably pay it off on a daily basis, if not weekly at the most.
Yeah, and so you're not paying any interest. And you're not getting into any trouble.
Exactly.
And you're not using it to gamble, I assume.
No, gambling, it was just almost, about 6 years ago now was the last time that I ever gambled. And it was just before I took a trip to Peru. I spent 30 days in Peru, and that's exactly what I needed. I was right at the end. I'd been on the medication for ADD for a couple of years, just trying to shake when you do this thing for so long, it doesn't go away immediately. And medication doesn't cure all of the things that ADD causes, and it still hasn't. It's still hard for me to read a book, things like that. But this trip was exactly what I needed to just change myself. You have to get out of an addiction finally, even though you have a lot of tools, you have to change your life. And I think a lot of people, they don't know that or realize how much they have to change to actually get out of it for 100% out of it. Because if you are a drinker and drinking makes you gamble, you need to stop drinking. And I did, because I don't have an alcohol problem, but I have a gambling problem that's fueled by alcohol.
One thing leads to another.
And the same thing, if you're trying to quit smoking, you have to stop doing the things that you would associate with smoking. And unfortunately for a lot of people, that's getting up in the morning. Mm-hmm. So that's why, cigarettes are very hard to quit, even though they are not as detrimental in the short term as, say going on an alcohol bender or, overdosing on drugs or spending $25,000 in a night gambling. Cigarettes have a long-term effect. And so because they don't have that immediate, I got to stop this, People have a lot more trouble with that. But I had this $40,000 in debt, and I was making probably 30 something a year, and that was just not working.
The math doesn't work there.
It does not.
The math doesn't work. Yeah, you got to interrupt the pattern is really what you're saying.
You really do. The travel, I recommend that to anyone. Go away from your current situation. And if you're at the tail end of your recovery, that might be just what you need.
Yeah, if the problem is I walk by that bar and I want to go in and have a cigarette, well, if I'm in Peru, I can't be walking by that bar, and eventually I've interrupted that pattern, and it won't be an issue. So your background is what, job-wise?
Yeah, so I've been in financial management and accounting for the last 15 years.
And those of you who are watching on YouTube, because we're going to put a video of this on YouTube, Beau doesn't look like me, the traditional accountant. So just you can go to the video and look. He's not wearing an Armani suit today. Neither am I, but hey,
this is my everyday.
That's his everyday thing. But you also have your own business, your own thing that you do. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So my main business now is I'm a personal finance coach, and what I really want to do is help people. Well, I don't want anyone to be in the situation I was in, and mine was unique, but it's easy to get into the level of debt that I was without a gambling addiction if you just don't pay attention to what you're doing. And, if you don't start putting stuff away, then you have an emergency. You don't have an emergency fund. You don't have any savings, and then you have to go into debt. And you might even have to go the payday loan route, which is the worst.
Very bad.
And we can have a whole other podcast
we've done
about
shows
that.
on that. Yep.
Exactly. So I just want to make sure people are really educated in a very simple way, because people find personal finance to be really dull, and some people would just rather eat trash than talk about their finances at all. And that they don't even have to have a bad situation going on. They might even have a lot of extra income to invest. They just don't want to think about that stuff. And so what I'm trying to do is make it easier for them. So personal finance coach, I'm here to simplify and organize in a very simple way, and we meet once a year or twice a year to figure out your stuff, and we kind of automate it all. So I've been writing for my website, investwisely.ca, and I have a podcast now, which you're going to be on shortly, called The Personal Finance Show. And I'm also, because of my background in accounting, I'm not a designated accountant, but I have lots of years of bookkeeping experience, and I did do 95% of my CGA courses back in the day during the time before I was medicated for ADD. So you can imagine,
it's a pretty good achievement.
I didn't really feel like doing another exam. I'm like, this is so hard for me, and so I wonder if I would have finished otherwise. But I do realize now that that wasn't the path that I was on. But what I do like is the basics, and I want to teach everyone the basics. So personal finance, but also bookkeeping. I'm a bookkeeping coach, QuickBooks Online. So
if I've got a small business, then I call you up, and you're not going to do my books for me. You're going to show me how to set it up so that I can do my books.
Exactly, and everybody can learn basic bookkeeping. In terms of classifying, where an expense goes and how to make a simple statement for you or maybe a partner to look at, or whoever you're doing business with, invoicing, that kind of stuff. I can show you how to do it, because you don't want to be paying someone on an hourly basis to do stuff that, when you're starting a business, you might have a lot of time and not a lot of money.
Yep.
And that's the time to learn this stuff.
Oh, yeah, and I've had hundreds of clients over the years who were self-employed because, hey, I can make more money as a self-employed person. I'm going to be a roofer, a drywall guy. I'm going to drive a truck, whatever it is. They're not accountants, though, so they don't realize what you're supposed to be keeping track of, how you're supposed to be doing it. They don't understand all the initials you got to know, like HST and WSIB and E, all that sort of stuff, EHT and so on, and that's what gets them into trouble. And I always say, before you start a business, it would be great if you could spend a few $1,000s with a lawyer and a few $1,000s with an accountant. And, well, of course, nobody can. That's impossible. Exactly. I'm starting a business because I don't have any money. So it sounds like the service that you're providing would be great for someone like that to point them in the right direction. Okay, let me show you all the tools that are out there. Because we have computers now. That's a pretty cool thing.
Exactly.
And you don't have to do the old green ledger paper like I learned on
no
35
more
years
T
ago.
accounts.
T accounts. I was using those last week, I'll have you know, because I had to figure something
Sometimes
out.
useful.
I went around the office asking all the accountants, do I have this right? And they're all looking at me like I'm crazy. But I think that's a great way to start out, and it's a great way to prevent problems in the future. So anybody who's either in a small business or starting one, then that would be a service that you would provide. And again, you're not going to do the work; you're going to show them how to do the work.
And I'm not even going to come to where you are. This is the 2017, so we're doing this over video, and it's all going to be through screen sharing, and you're using QuickBooks Online to make it easy. So everything's in the cloud.
Which keeps the cost a lot lower.
The cost
too.
is so much lower. You don't want to pay for my travel to come and visit you, and you don't want to pay the higher fees I would have to charge if I did come and visit you. So everything that I do is in the cloud, and it's all through video. The apps that they have out there are free, and you can share the screen, and I can look at what you're doing and point you to where you need to click or the thing you need to fill out. Everything's a little easier now with technology, but sometimes people just need a little bit of coaching.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. So we will put in the show notes all of the links that you just mentioned to your website. So the best place for people to find you would be at what URL?
It's investwisely.ca.
So all one word, investwisely.ca. And then the name of your podcast is?
It's called The Personal Finance Show.
And you can find that on iTunes, Stitcher,
You can just
places.
type Beau Humphreys and The Personal Finance Show in Google, and it'll come up.
There you go, because there are not that many Beau Humphreys
That's
out there,
right.
So.
And I got all the first page of Google is all
You're
me.
it. It's all you. So Beau, Beau, and then Humphreys.
That's right.
That's fantastic. So for people listening who were going through what you were going through, your advice would be get help.
Yes.
And a place like CAMH would be a great place to start, I would assume.
CAMH is great, and they have a problem gambling service. You can find it online. You can go and walk in and try to find them, but they're findable, so you can Google them.
Yeah, and they're obviously big here in the Toronto area and in Ontario, but there are other places that can help with that. So I think reaching out for help is a good idea. And then on the debt side, you're happy that you made the decision you did on the consumer proposal.
I really do tell people that the consumer proposal saved my life, because I don't know, even if I would have figured out the ADD thing, I still would have been in this crippling debt situation. So I don't know if I would have been able to get out in the way that I did. Or it might have taken another 10 years.
Well, and when you do the math, $40,000 in debt, the minimum payments are a big number.
They are.
Interest is adding up every month. So even if you could pay the interest every month, the $40,000 is still there.
It's still there, and it's always going to be.
The math, unless you're making $200,000 a year, the math just doesn't work. So at some point, again, you've got to interrupt the pattern. So it worked for you. Well, that's great. Fantastic. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. So as I said, I'm going to put links to everything we talked about in the show notes. So they'll be over at Hoyes.com. You can just do a search for Beau, Beau, and it'll be the only thing that comes up there. And thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
Great. Thanks for being here, Beau. That's our show for today. As I said, full links to everything we talked about and a full transcript will be at Hoyes.com. That's Hoyes.com. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. Thanks for listening. That was Debt Free in 30.